looks like they could be turning things around a little bit. They also had a big win last night, taking down the Clippers by 5. They're now on a 3-game win streak. Jason Tatum dropping 40. Kemba looking like Kemba again, dropping 34. Stephen A., how are you feeling about Boston now?
You know what? I'm feeling a hell of a lot better. They've beaten Indiana, Washington, and the Clippers.
Yeah, you are.
So I'm feeling a lot better about them. They needed to step up, and that's exactly what they're doing. Remember, we never lamented them from a talent perspective. We know that Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are studs. And we know that even though Paul George had a big game, he didn't have a big game in the fourth quarter, A. And B, more importantly, it was primarily because of Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown and the way they defended against him, because he shot like 1 for 11 against them and was lights out against everybody else. So those brothers deserve a lot of credit. But Kemba Walker's got to get most of the credit. He hit 25, and what Max and I both lamented last week was the fact that he clearly was not healthy. His knee has been bothering him. We know what Kemba Walker can do when he's healthy. Here's the thing. We pointed the finger at Brad Stevens, or at least I did, and you're damn right, I ain't apologizing for it, because at the time, he deserved it. You got to find the pulse of the team and peel out whatever's necessary. Now, whatever has happened since he's been on the hot seat, it ain't just the players that has responded. It's Brad Stevens who has responded. Never question his basketball acumen. Never question his know-how. Never question the fact that he had a winning record. Remember, they went to the playoffs the last 4 years, and 3 of the last 4 years they were in the conference finals. We can't sneeze at the job that Brad Stevens has done. The problem is what he was doing up until a week ago was very unimpressive, and it looked like the team was going in the wrong direction. And if you're going to point the finger at anybody else, why the hell should he get let off the hook? But ever since that noise was percolating, particularly after they lost to Atlanta, and Gallinari gave them 38 for crying out loud, we saw Brad Stevens be more demonstrative in his post-game interview than ever before. And ever since then, they win in basketball games. So major props to him, because whatever modifications that needed to be made, clearly he has made them as a coach as well. Whatever conversations he may have had, whatever motivational tactics he may have employed, whatever you want to point to, Brad Stevens has stepped up. But damn it, he needed to step up based on the way they were looking. And props to him for doing so thus far.
No, I totally disagree. And this just goes back to, like, here's some new evidence, and you and I are exactly on the opposite side of it still. I don't think it's about Brad Stevens, Stephen A. We both knew last week that this season Kemba hadn't been Kemba. That's the bottom line. And Danny Ainge put a roster together heavily reliant on Kemba being that playmaker in the backcourt in order to make it a real big three on offense. Now, you can talk about defensive effort, and I can point to the fact that it's still going to get better when Marcus Smart gets back, and he hasn't been there. But that also affected the offense, because even if he's not a dynamic offensive player, he can play in the backcourt. He can play your point. So no Marcus Smart and no real Kemba Walker. And Kemba is too much of a leader to make excuses. Even ask him now, hey, are you feeling better? He won't even tell you, yeah, that's the reason. No, he says he's playing better. He's not going to give you excuses. It's one of the things that makes him a real leader and a guy that they wanted in that locker room. But he wasn't Kemba Walker. And how does that affect the defense? Stephen A., we don't have to like it, but we know it's reality. And in fact, I'm sure you have mentioned this on the air in the past, because everyone knows it in basketball. If you want a big man to play defense, what do you have to do if he runs the floor? You got to feed him. You got to feed him to get him to go on the other end, right? Like, people understand this. And that goes really for teams in a lot of respects. It shouldn't be this way. You should find the resolve to play defense even when the offense isn't working, and good defense can lead to better offense. But the reality is, when the offense is flat and things aren't going your way, it can take the energy out on the other end. Kemba Walker looks like Kemba Walker again. So now the offense is clicking again. And so now the defense is being played with more intensity. This was always, in my estimation, a Kemba Walker not being Kemba Walker issue, and secondarily, not having Marcus Smart. Oh, and by the way, I'll say it again as I said it last week. Time Lord needs more minutes. Look what happens when this dude is on the floor. He can really play. My feeling about the Celtics is exactly as it was. They need a healthy Kemba Walker, period. They got him now, it looks like.
Well, first of all, let me say this. Kemba Walker all of a sudden didn't get healthy the last 3 games. He's got 32, 21, and 25 points over the last 3 games. He didn't all of a sudden get healthy. The reality of the situation is that you had to figure out a way, whether it was to motivate him, get him to motivate other people. Whatever needed to be done was done. thus far anyway. And that's why I say I'm still not backing off of what I had to say about Brad Stevens. Nobody said he couldn't coach. Nobody said he didn't have a resume. Nobody said that he deserved to be fired or anything like that. What we said was, excuse me, Brad Stevens, this is what the expectation is for a team with this level of talent. And I don't give a damn Kemba Walker or no Kemba Walker. With Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum, you have no business being a below 500 team in the National Basketball Association with those two studs on the court for you. You just don't. And so as a result, even though Kemba Walker has stepped up and he's playing better, and we appreciate that, the reality of the situation is it doesn't change what we saw. It doesn't change what our demands are of Brad Stevens being in Boston. There are expectations that come along with being with this team. You could lose in the playoffs, but you got to be formidable and you got to be a threat. You can't be a below 500 team, which at the time was a worse team than the New York Knicks. There's no excuse for that. And so even though Kemba Walker getting 32, 21, and 25 over the last 3 games is sort of resurrecting himself, even though he's still fighting those knee injuries, and we understand it because we know what he can do when he's healthy, the bottom line is that still doesn't absolve Brad Stevens from what he has to do. If you go to any coach, any quality coach in the NBA, and you say, here's Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown, nobody wants to hear an excuse as to why you're below 500. That's why we were having the discussion about Brad Stevens. It wasn't some long-term thing or anything like that. We were looking at the Celtics and we were like, yo, they're below 500. No excuse for that.
Well, look, put it this way. You could always say, like, is Brad Stevens a perfect coach? No. Is it legitimate to say, hey, you still got enough to be more competitive than, right, no one's perfect, but to be more competitive than you are? Yes, that is a legitimate point to make. My point is, what is the top point? Like, what's the reason if you have to pinpoint one? Is it Brad Stevens? No, it's Kemba Walker's health. And Stephen A., you said, I mean, like, just look what happened. You can watch him move. He's obviously moving better than he was. He's obviously more healthy than he was. And lo and behold, as you mentioned, 32, 25, and they're starting to win. And in fact, when you say, did he suddenly get healthy? No, he gradually got healthy. He had the procedure, right, in the offseason, and at first it was no good, and little by little he's regained his health. And in fact, what I think we're seeing, knock wood, is that over the last week or so, he's feeling much closer, if not back to his normal self. And here we go. So could Stevens do a better? Everyone could do a better job when you're losing. But if you want to say, what's the reason they're losing? They didn't have Kemba. They got him now, and they're winning.
Yeah. Well, he didn't play against Atlanta either when they got shellacked, and that was really the final straw where everybody was concerned. I know we got Drew Brees to talk about. I know we got LeBron James to talk about. But guess what? There's a new team surging in the NBA. Out west. They knocked off the Lakers last night. Guess who? All that and more coming up. First take in the house. Let's go.
The stars shining brightly in L.A. tonight.
Yeah, the old heads, you know what I mean?
Ain't no beginner, head spinner. I make you dizzy with the most I made.
Russo leaves it for LeBron. Both technical fouls were on Booker, and he has been ejected. And a put-away punch.
What's going on, everybody? Welcome into First Take. It is the GOAT Show, and not just because you have Stephen A. Smith and Max Kellerman. How about this for a lineup, fellas? We got Joe Montana joining us live. I cannot wait for that. Never had the chance to interview him. And Amanda Nunes. So we're going to have a good time here today on First Take. But, fellas, it looks like the Suns had a good time last night. Let's talk about it. Devin Booker putting in work, taking down the Lakers at Staples by 10. Take a look at the Western Conference standings now. The Jazz are in first place, followed by the Suns and the Lakers, round out the top 3, and then the Clippers. So the Suns win. Max, do you think this is a big deal or no big deal?
No big deal. And the reason the Suns are a big deal, and we thought that coming into the season, but this win, no big deal. And the reason is they're playing a depleted Lakers team. The Lakers team, this is not really the Lakers. First of all, you have AD out. And I and many people were pointing out, without Schroeder especially at the time, that's devastating because the Lakers really need that other playmaker in the backcourt. Schroeder comes back, the Lakers cruise to a win. It looks like, oh, maybe all LeBron needs is Schroeder in the backcourt with him. And with what else he has, he can figure it out. But actually, they were also missing Gasol, and they were also missing Kuzma. and they were playing a powerhouse team in the Suns. I know Devin Booker gets ejected and all that stuff, but he's not the only one. He's the focal point, and they spent a lot of defensive energy on him and Chris Paul. But those guys can move the ball, find open guys, Bridges and Crowder and Saric and Cam Johnson, and not to mention Ayton. You know, like, they have a whole lot, that team. So the Suns are a powerhouse. And look, they went 8-0 in the bubble before they got Chris Paul, and we knew they were going to be a powerhouse this year. But this particular win against the Lakers team coming to the All-Star break, with now LeBron has to miss the next game because he's ailing, not just down AD, but down Kuzma and down Marc Gasol. I'm not going to read too much into this.
I will, and I'm going to say it's a big victory, and I'm going to say that because Devin Booker got ejected, which, by the way, is a different story for another day. We've got to look into this. I mean, the NBA officiating. I'm not going to even point to the officiating. I'm going to talk to the heavy hand that the league has given them to hand down upon players. Let's just take this into consideration, y'all. We've been ravaged by a global pandemic. You don't have fans in attendance. It's depressing enough to watch these guys perform without fans in attendance. Yet they go out on the court, they go all out, they play their hearts out. They act like it's 20,000 people in attendance. They're doing all of this stuff, and then you sit up there, and a team that has been dormant for years is on the rise. The 4th-ranked defense in the National Basketball Association, led by Monty Williams, who, by the way, is another Coach of the Year candidate. What a sensational job he is doing as head coach of the Phoenix Suns. You got a star in Devin Booker who had no business not being picked for the All-Star game by the coaches. He's averaging 25 a game. And yes, there is no Anthony Davis, Max, but there's still LeBron James. And Devin Booker is on the other side of the court. And that is what warrants an ejection. I mean, there was nothing demonstrative. There were no fists being thrown or anything like that.
No debate there.
We couldn't even figure it out. And you're going to eject this guy for a nationally televised game. Just no regard whatsoever for the fans. And that's where the NBA needs to be called out about this. Just no regard for the fans in this particular situation. You don't think about the fact that it's a nationally televised game and we want to see Devin Booker and you're just going to eject him over something like that? It's utterly ridiculous. Having said all of that, the Phoenix Suns still showed up and showed out and handled their business. And I understand that the Lakers were shorthanded, but without Devin Booker, aren't they supposed to be shorthanded? With CP3 only hitting 1 field goal the entire game, although he registered 10 assists. Is that not a big deal? But I'm looking at Mikal Bridges. I'm looking at Saric. I'm looking at the rest of these cats, even a Jay Crowder and all of these boys. And I'm just saying to myself, excuse me, the Phoenix Suns are coming. Best record in the NBA since late January. 15 of their last 18 games they've won. They play defense. They go at it. And I just love the fact that they're on the rise and they're doing what they're doing. Because, again, if they had been a team that had been there all of this time, Max, then it would not have been a big deal that they beat the Lakers. But the fact that they're just now ascending from bubble play to now, and you see them continuing to get better and better. You see how exceptionally well coached they are. You see how exceptional of a defensive team they are. You recognize the star that is Devin Booker, because he is the star. Make no mistake about it. And I just love what I'm seeing right now, man. I'm just looking at these guys right here. And Ayton, by the way, he finished with 17 points. This brother can play. Big boy can play. Obviously, he was picked before Luka Doncic, Trae Young, and those boys. And so we sit up there and look at him along with his injured history, and we say, what's the big deal? But the brother can play. The brother can play. And so I'm just happy with what I'm seeing right now, and I'm going to give him props where it's due.
Bunch of things based on what you just said. First, Devin Booker gets ejected. And by the way, Stephen A., not just consideration for the fans, because if he deserves to be ejected, he deserves to be ejected. But what was that first whistle about? And then after the game, they say constant complaining. You tee him up for that's basically nothing. And then he directed something at an official they didn't like. 2 whistles and you're out. Come on. But at that time, so we're on the same page about that. But at that time, the Suns had a lead. Like, they were controlling the game and they had a lead. I think they were up like 7. We're talking about the third quarter. It's not like they played the whole game without Devin Booker. And the Suns are a deeper team than the Lakers in terms of their talent that would be in most rotations. Talent that would start on a lot of teams. They're deeper in that sense than the Lakers, who, in addition to not having a lot of those guys, like, LeBron and AD may be better than anyone they have, but the next 5 or 6 or 7 players on the list would all be from the Suns. And the Lakers are shorthanded. That's why I'm discounting it. Got to say this about the Suns. They're a high IQ team in addition to everything else. You look at Chris Paul and Devin Booker, the court vision that Devin Booker has. Of course, we know about Chris Paul, the connection between Chris Paul and a guy like Saric. If you you have legit 3-and-D guys. They're legit, and we knew this coming into the season. It's not like this is some kind of new information. I'm just saying, if the Lakers, and by the way, LeBron did his thing, like he started hitting threes late in the game. He just didn't have enough with him. And based on that game, I'm not convinced, for example, if AD's back, the Suns are going to beat the Lakers in a 7-game series. Excellent win by an excellent team, but it doesn't change my thinking about anything. I can't call it a big deal win.
Well, I say it changed my thinking from the standpoint that I'm going to look at Phoenix with a level of seriousness I may not have looked at them before. Even though I saw them in bubble play and then I saw them earlier this season, the fact that they're on this kind of tier, beating the teams that they've beaten, along with the leadership of CP3, combined with the fact that Devin Booker has emerged as a star, that's it. That's valid in and of itself. But forgive me for taking a moment to give props to Monty Williams. You see, because we just lamented the other day the paucity of African American coaches in the National Basketball Association, the National Football League, and what have you. Look at the job that Monty Williams is bringing. And by the way, notable names that have been assistants for years or have been scouts for years, the Willie Greens of the world that were once in Golden State, the Mark Bryants of the world, the Randy Ayers, people like that. My brother, the former head coach for the Philadelphia 76ers, former head coach at Ohio State University. You're just seeing some of the personnel on their staff, and I just can't say enough about Monty Williams, man. So many people talk about this guy as a character guy. Obviously, he's a great, great person and what have you, and worked under Popovich and others. But the job that he is doing as head coach of the Phoenix Suns cannot go unnoticed. Think about what we were saying about this team before he arrived. They were on a fast track to nowhere. We were lamenting the fact that Devin Booker had to sign a long-term deal there to make sure he got his money, et cetera, et cetera. And look, in just a year and a half or so there, look at the job that this man is doing along with his coaching staff in the Phoenix Suns. I ain't gonna lie to you. I'm very proud. I'm very, very proud of what I'm seeing from those brothers down in Phoenix. Up in Phoenix, rather.
No question. No question, guys. The Suns haven't been in the postseason in a decade. I think that's going to change this season. That's for sure. Obviously, leapfrogging the Lakers in the standings.